Hello, we've been sent a plan today for evaluation, and I would like to take a closer look. And before we begin, I think our first place of starting is to determine what type of guide would be most appropriate here. Now, when I say most appropriate, I'm not saying that. Anyway, let's talk about what's most appropriate here. So, based on this, the first question I have is this a digital or analog workflow? And when I look at this, what I see is I see tooth with circumferential, 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 circumferential. Basically, all these teeth have full coverage, and maybe the anteriors may be just facings. I don't know. I don't have the knowledge of this case. So, and then same thing on the lower. All of these have full coverage restorations. So, the most predictable way to do this case is to have this case done in an analog fashion using the CCAT bite plate relined with your bite registration material and then have that converted into your surgical guide. That being said, that does not mean that the CEREC data won't integrate. My experience has shown that on all ceramic crowns, we often get CEREC integration to occur. The challenge becomes there may be minor discrepancies in how well the data integrates because of the scatter associated with the metallic restoration and even scatter associated with the all ceramic restorations. So there's a reasonable chance that if you submit this to CCAT for a guide to be manufactured, they may come back and say that they do not recommend the fabrication of a digital workflow for this type of case. So that being said, in this particular case, the dentist was able to merge the data. If we take a closer look at it here in the axial view, we can see that the data is pretty well merged together. Again, it's very difficult to see exactly, like if we take a look right here, it's a little difficult to see is that, so let me change the colors here. It's difficult to see is that as the CEREC data is aligned, that's the edge, or is that the edge right there, or is that the edge from where that scatter is? So there becomes some discrepancies in this. The other thing, as we take a look here, as we go down a little bit, sorry, again, it becomes more difficult right in here to determine right here, is that the edge of the restoration versus that. So there becomes some levels of discrepancies, and again depends on your comfort level of overcoming these discrepancies and or how critical the site is to be tight. So the good news here is our guide, our virtual wax up is designed quite well. Looks like it's accommodated for the 1 millimeter of potential bone loss on the extraction site. Here we can see that now we've planned our implant. So generally speaking, this implant placement looks pretty well done. We can see right here that it is coming out the buccal incisal edge, and quite honestly, we don't have any room to be able to move this implant one way or the other. It's kind of based on the amount of bone volume we have. We don't have too much of a choice. We do need to extend the implant here because of gaining primary stability. If we were to outline the tooth, I would say that this is my root right here. So we need to extend that implant as we've done here to gain primary stability. So our primary stability will come from this area right here. The big key is to make sure that we keep that buccal plate intact through extraction, and or that we verify that there's no fenestrations up in this area, as that we'll often see with these root canal treated lateral incisors. So everything from that perspective looks pretty nice. If I were to be critical of the plan, my only major area of concern will regard around the sleeve. Here I can believe that this is the outline of my adjacent tooth, tooth number 6, and here is the outline of tooth number 8. And what I can see here is that my sleeve right here is quite a bit into that tooth, whereas I have quite a bit of space right in here. So I would accommodate for that simply by adjusting the implant through rotation. So I would come in here, and basically what I would do in this case is I would just tilt my implant a little bit like so to get it better centered there, so that I'm in between the teeth so that my guide and the sleeve will fit. And then when I do that, unfortunately, we start coming out the mesial part of this tooth restoration right here. So to overcome that, I will simply take the apex of the implant and tilt it back a little bit like that. And now we're in the middle of the bone, and we've got our sleeve pretty well centered between these adjacent teeth, so that we have the ability to make sure that our guide seats without having to do significant contouring to the adjacent teeth. So hopefully this helps. We'll take a quick look at number 28 as well. 28 looks pretty straightforward. Again, ideally we'd like to see our occlusal plane a little bit more level, but that is not really that possible here given how tight this space is. My only critique on this one would be the level of bone. I would expect, I think our buccal plate, our buccal bone is more right here. So I would probably, in my experience with this, is I would probably plan this implant just a hair deeper to accommodate for any bone loss from the tooth extraction. I would certainly graft this gap right here and verify that our buccal plate does exist. When we go through the 360 here, we can kind of see that the buccal plate does kind of exist, maybe right there, but it's really hard to see that. And then that also questions how thin that buccal plate may be. The other thought on the buccal plate is that the scatter from the endo itself could be causing it to look a little fuzzy. So thanks again for submitting the case, and I look forward to more in the future.